So you don't need to take a lot of notes because they are here. Many other things, many of them. If they are not here, I will tell you. Okay, so the first thing that we should try to understand is something about the dipole interaction. And in particular, why the dipole interaction is so different compared to the non-dipole, the short range. So the physics of ultra-cold gases is to a large extent given by interactions. The reason is because, as Florian was mentioning to you, you have very low energies, right? And in spite of the fact that these gases are very, very, very dilute, right, the interactions play a very, very important role. So these gases are, just to have an idea, these gases have a density which is 12 orders of magnitude, something like that, smaller than water. Yes? So they're incredibly dilute, but in spite of this, interactions play a very important role. So typically, the interactions that play a role in many experiments are what we call short-range interactions. They are interactions, so you have two particles, right? And they collide. They have a relative coordinate here. And the typical potential of interaction looks something like this. Yes? Yes, it's good. So the typical form of the interaction is something like this. You have the potential of interactions, the relative coordinate, and then you have something like this. In this, the case like 1/6. So it's a very, so it decays very quickly because it goes to a very high power. So, as a matter of fact, if you are interested in just very low energy properties of the system, you can substitute this potential, which may be very complicated to calculate, by an effective pseudo potential which is something like this. And that's just make it simple. Yes. So you have something like, you have the h bar, yes, you have the mass of the particles which are colliding, which are so they are the same, and you have the scattering length. This quantity is an important one. It's the S-wave scattering. Scattering. Yes. So you can forget about everything in your potential and just characterize everything by a single constant, which is scattering. If this constant is positive, then your interactions are effectively repulsive. Yes. If this constant is negative, on the contrary, you will have attractive interactions. Yes. Now, this scattering length is given by nature, yes, but you can modify it because this potential has bound states, right? And when one of these bound states goes out or in, then the scattering properties get resonant. And this may be, as I say, changed externally by means of magnetic fields and by other means. And this produces scattering resonances. So this is a quantity, so which is an important quantity, as I say, that you can control experimentally. It can be very big, it can be very small, it can be put basically to 0, positive, negative, and so on. The dipole-dipole interaction is different because it's the interaction that you have between two dipoles. Yes. Now they are not just 2 points, right, but 2 arrows, right, which are your small magnets or your small electric dipoles. And the interaction between 2 dipoles, let's assume just for simplicity now of the discussion that they are oriented in the same direction. So this is the dipole moment, which I would call D, which is, let's say, that is oriented in a particular direction, let's say the Z direction, right? Now, if you have 2 dipoles, and this is the vector joining them, the dipole interaction between them is of this form. Is of this form. This is the angle theta between the direction R and the direction D. So the dipole interaction is fundamentally different compared to the to this type of interaction due to 2 main reasons. First of all, this type of interaction does not depend on the angle between the because then in this type of interaction there is no preferred direction in the space, right? Whereas here there is a preferred direction in the space, which is the direction of your arrows. Right? So this is this here, which is the anisotropy. It's an isotropic interaction. The second big difference is this. This decays much slower than this one. It's actually an example of what is called a long branch interaction. Because it decays sufficiently slow. So the combination of these 2 features will make this physics, the physics of dipole gases, very different. Because it is basically like changing the rules of the game that you play. Now, you see that this interaction in particular is such that if the 2 atoms are seeing each other like this, this 1 minus 3 cosinus squared theta, theta is now 0. So this is 1 minus 3, so it's minus 2. So here the dipole interaction is negative. Yes? Whereas if they are seeing each other like this, yes, here the dipole interaction is positive because now theta is pi half, so this is 0 and you get 1. So this means that, as I told you before, negative interactions means attraction, positive interactions mean repulsion. Here, you were either repulsive or attractive. Here, depending on the direction they collide, they may be attractive or repulsive. So, somehow, for some things, dipole gases constitute a sort of hybrid situation, a sort of intermediate situation between being attractive and being repulsive. And as we will see later, the fact that you have attraction, the possibility to have some directions with attraction, is a reason to be concerned, so to say. You should be worried about that, because if 2 things tend to attract each other, yes, they will tend to bunch, yes, they will tend to collapse. Yes. And this is an important issue in what concerns the stability of this system. So this is the dipole interaction. Now, this constant of here, yeah, which I call here CDD. I wrote it in general, but so because here I did not talk whether this is a magnetic dipole or an electric dipole, but for many of the things that they will say, basically this does not matter. So for electric dipole, for magnetic dipoles, this is the vacuum permittivity times the magnetic moment divided by 4 pi. And for the electric dipoles, this is the dipole squared divided by 4 pi epsilon 0. But this is the, what's called the electric permittivity. Okay. So, but for many of the things that I was saying, it doesn't matter so much whether they are magnetic dipoles or electric. Now, why this is relevant? Why this interaction is relevant? But this is relevant because there is a new generation of experiments which is coming since several years, in which dipole-dipole interactions play an important role. Okay? So let me now show you a graph. This one. So, so these are experiments in two main systems. Magnetic atoms and polar molecules. So here we will be talking about magnetic dipoles. Here we are talking about dipoles, electric dipoles. Okay? This notation that I was making. Okay. So this graph tells you something about how dipolar are these systems. And how dipolar, in the rest of the talk you will see this many times, in the rest of this lecture, how dipolar is dipolar, it depends very much on the ratio between the dipole-dipole interaction and the short-range interaction. Yes? We will quantify this in some way later. But what is important here is how important is my dipole is many times is given by this ratio, which is what I am putting here. So this corner of here, which is a very weakly dipolar or almost non-dipolar system, are typical experiments in alkaline systems, like rubidium condensates and so on. See, they are the typical experiments right now, or up to very recent. And you see here, these two ones, which are here, this is chromium and erbium, and this prosium, which are around here. These are these magnetic atoms. These are atoms which have a very large magnetic moment, right? So this is the case of chromium, which has 6 Bohr magnetons, erbium, which has 7 Bohr magnetons, and this prosium, which has 10 Bohr magnetons. And so this is the magnetic moment. So they have an enormously large magnetic moment. If you compare it with alkalis, where this number is typically the order of 1 Bohr magneton, this means that, for example, for chromium, the dipole-dipole interaction which goes in the square is 36 times bigger than for rubidium. For dysprosium is 100 times bigger. Yes. So this makes them much more dipolar, and this is why they are here. So close to the close to 1. But then there is a second system, which is of importance here, which is polar molecules. So they are molecules which are formed by 2 different atomic species, like potassium and rubidium, sodium and cesium, lithium cesium, lithium potassium, sodium potassium, rubidium cesium, strontium rubidium, and so on. And I think that Florian will tell you something about strontium rubidium tomorrow. Yes. So these are molecules which have a much larger effective dipole-dipole interaction. So typically you measure the dipoles in what is called a dBi, the electric dipole moment. We measure in units of a dBi, which is a unit, yes, which is something like 3.3 times 10 to the minus 30 coulomb per meter, something like this. Yes. So is a unit. But perhaps more important than talking about absolute units is to talk about the relative importance between these two. So in units, so if we could express this into an equivalent magnetic moment, this would be something like at least of the order of 100 Bohr magnetons. So it's one order of magnitude or even more than the magnetic moment that you will have here, and therefore 2, 3, 4 orders of magnitude larger dipole-dipole interaction. So this is, so polar molecules are, if you are able to do something that I will talk right now, which is to polarize them, you will enter into a regime in which dipole-dipole interactions are extremely large. Yes. And in this lecture, I will go from, in this first lecture, to systems. First of all, I will discuss systems in which dipole-dipole interaction is large but not extremely large. And then I will move to systems in which the dipole-dipole interaction is really very strong. And then we will see that the physics changes radically. Okay, so these are the systems that we will encounter in this lecture. But as I said, for many of the things I will not, for many of the discussion I will not mention explicitly whether they are magnetic or electric. So now, one comment about pseudopotential. This is an idea that I just mentioned before, the pseudopotential. So for the short-range interactions, you were substituting this by a delta, which was something like 4 pi h bar squared a over n in the delta function. Now, in the case of dipolar interactions, you have a short-range part of the interactions, and then in addition you have this dipole-dipole interaction. Yes. So you have the short-range part, and then you have a dipole-dipole interaction. So in principle, you will have to do something very similar, which is to perform the scattering theory here, and then you will get something like the pseudopotential, so something, let me call this constant G. You will get something like this. Yes. So this is a, so you can see, I will not tell much more details about that, but you can see that you can substitute this by a pseudopotential, which is this, the dipole-dipole interaction plus the contact interaction. Now, here a comment. Yes. So this problem is not the same problem as saying, okay, I don't have this, then I will not have this. Okay. This constant which appears here is in general the solution of the whole problem with the dipolar interaction. So this will be in general dependent of the dipole itself. Okay. So this I will not mention explicitly later on. But in general, it's not true that this will be the same as without having the dipolar interaction. Okay. This is particularly clear if in the effect which is called shaped resonance, right? So this is the scattering length, and this is the dipole in some unit. And you see that for some values of the dipole, you may hit one of these resonances, okay? Which is looks like it's a scattering resonance again. So basically, the dipole interaction can push one bound state up.
So just one question. This means that you have to take the A-square part of the dipole interaction.
You have to solve the whole problem together.
Yes.
Yes. And in general, you will have. It's not even guaranteed. This is the result of calculations.
Yes.
It's not guaranteed that the pseudopotential will even look like this. But it happens that it looks like this. And this is important because I will use right now this pseudopotential when writing down the equations for a Bose-Einstein condition.
Yes.
So now that we know about the dipole-dipole interaction, I will concentrate, I will focus now on dipolar Bose-Einstein condensates. Okay? So let's see. Dipolar BC. So how do you treat this type of problem? So it's an interacting problem. So the Hamiltonian, the system is something like this. This is D3R. This is the field operator, which describes the bosons, right, in a particular position. You have then the kinetic energy, you have trap, like an external potential here. Yes. So this part is the non-interacting part of my system. And then I have here something like this. Okay, so this is the interaction potential, the interaction part of the Hamiltonian. So you have some interparticle interaction, yes, between two particles at the L and R. Now, here I will substitute this pseudo potential that we just saw before. And then you see that I will get two contributions to the interaction. One part will be given by this short range part, by the delta part. The other part will come from the dipole. Okay? So if now I assume that my system is Bose condensed, the bosonic operator here, I will substitute it by a wave function, by a C number, by a number. It's not anymore an operator. And then what I recover is this Hamiltonian, which looks very similar to this one. Yes. Yes. Well, this is the type. Yes. Now, from here, I can express directly the Schrödinger equation associated to this Hamiltonian. Which is like this. Okay. So this is the equation that will give me the physics of the dipole condensate at sufficiently low temperatures. So you see that when I'm going from here to here, I am neglecting some things here, because I am approximating this by C numbers, I'm neglecting fluctuations. So, here you see that we have three ingredients, which will play a very important role in the full discussion. The first one is the drop. Because this is a potential energy, which is basically the drop, yes, where my atoms are confined. So this is the non-interacting part of the Hamiltonian. Then we have an interacting part here, which comes from the short range energy, short range interactions. Yes. And then we have the dipole-dipole interaction. Without this term here, yes, without this term here, this is what is called the Gross-Pitayevsky equation, right? With this term here, this equation is similar, but before this part of here, which was introducing a non-linearity in the problem, but this non-linearity was local, so this is a local non-linearity, local non-linearity. So what I mean by that is that the wave function in R is just given by the wave function in R. It's local. Yes. Now this part of here is also a non-linearity, but it's non-local. Yes. So this non-locality comes from this long-range character that we were mentioning before. So the competition between the trap, the short-range interaction, and the dipole-dipole interaction will determine the physics. Okay, in particular, so these non-local interactions lead to some interesting non-linear physics in the physics of dipolar systems, right? In particular, for example, in the physics of solitons, I believe that Professor Adhikari will mention that tomorrow. Yes. But for example, in the usual nonlinear Schrödinger equation, so without this term, yes, there are no solitons in higher dimensions than one. Yes. If you are in one dimension, yes, if you confine very strongly in two dimensions, and you have just a one-dimensional system, you can have what is called a soliton. So a wave packet which propagates without distortion. If you go to higher dimensions, right, you extend this, you relax this confinement, this soliton is unstable. If you add this non-local non-linearity, you make it stable in two dimensions. I will not mention too much on that, but I believe that Professor Adhikari will mention something on his lecture. So this is the equation that gives me the physics of a dipolar condensate. So now let me discuss this issue that I was mentioning before, which is the stability. So we will keep this in mind now. Okay. Stability. So in order to see why, so let me just come back to the equation that we had before. So here I had this Hamiltonian, which was the non-interacting part. And then I had something like the interacting part. Okay, so this is what we just wrote before. Okay, but now I will do the following. I will consider a very simple case. I will consider that I have a condensate which is non-trapped. It's everywhere. Yes, it's homogeneous. It's what is called a homogeneous PEC. Yeah. So this means that this wave function that I was saying to you is everywhere, no? And with a given density. Yes. And what I will do is the following. So I will take my homogeneous DEC, let's say, in 3 dimensions, it's everywhere with a given density. Let's call it M0, everywhere with density, right? And I will perturb it. I will put some excitations. I will put some ripples here. Now the question is, if I put some ripples there, if I put some excitations there, do they just stay small, or they will grow and everything will explode? So how stable is my solution there? This is like in mathematics, yes? When you take a system, yes, and you perturb it a little bit, if, for example, you have like a ball in a plate, yes, you perturb it a little bit and it comes back. You put the plate upside down, you put the ball and the ball will go out, right? So the same happens, we will try to do it here. We will try to perturb it a little bit and see whether it remains stable or not. Yes. So in order to do that, we are going to study the stability of this solution. So let me write this Hamiltonian in momentum space. Okay, so I will go from coordinate space to momentum space. Okay, why? Because if I am in an homogeneous system, yes, a good quantum number is momentum, right? Because there is nothing. So let's write this in momentum space. So this means that I will do this Fourier transform. But this V is just a quantization, it's just a volume that we think it is. Okay? So I do this, and this Hamiltonian looks like this. Now, this non-interacting part for a homogeneous VC, sorry, as I mentioned, this is just the kinetic energy, okay? Because I have no trap, I have no potential energy, I have just the kinetic energy. So this is the kinetic energy, this part. Okay, and this is the interaction. Okay. So in the interaction energy, I go from some momentum P1 and P2 to some other momentum such that I conserve the total momentum, right? Because I am in homogeneous space, right? So momentum is a good quantity. But here I have this, which is the Fourier transform of the interaction. Is the Fourier transform of this guy here. Yes. Now, the Fourier transform of this pseudo potential here, which is G delta plus the dipole-dipole interaction. Yes. Let's see how this looks like. This is just the Fourier transform. I do the Fourier transform. Now, what is the Fourier transform for delta? The Fourier transform for delta is a constant, okay? This is nothing else than, if you want, the Heisenberg principle. If I am very localized in space, I am completely delocalizing in momentum, right? So this is a constant. Yes. The Fourier transform of the dipole-dipole interaction, I will not do it explicitly, is in my notes, okay? And it's of this form. This angle, which I call theta p, is the angle between the dipolar direction and the vector p. Yes, is this angle. Yeah. This I call theta p. Yeah. Okay, so this is what we are going to have here. Okay. So now I will assume, by assumption, so to say, that my system is condensed in the flat, in the homogeneous system. This means that I am condensed at zero momentum. Zero momentum means that the function is not spatially dependent, so it's everywhere the same, right? So I will assume this. Yes. So this means that I will assume that A0 and A0 dagger, both of them are just given by the square root of the number. It's just a number. Okay. And then I do the following. I take this, substitute it here, and expand everything up to second order in these operators. In all other operators which are not the A0. Yes? And then what you get is this. Apart from a constant, which is not right. Okay? So this is what you have. Yes? This is just the density. This is the density of the condensate. So it's n divided by the volume. Right? Then, this type of Hamiltonian, you can reduce it now to the following form. Yes? By basically what you do here is to make a superposition of creation and annihilation operators. This is what is called a Pogoliubov transformation. Yes? What is important here is the following. This is the Hamiltonian which is describing excitation. This is describing these ripples that I was telling you, these perturbations. Right? Now, this is telling to me that these perturbations have a defined momentum, right, which is this P, and a defined energy associated with this momentum. This is what is called a dispersion, right? So the energy is a function of momentum, right? And this is the crucial point here. So here you have two pieces of information. First of all, this, which are describing this excitation, is not anymore a particle or a hole, so to say, but something like a combination of a particle and a hole, right? It's what is called a quasi-particle. quasi-particle. Okay, so now let's see what are these energies, because this is at the end of the day what is going to be important. Okay, let's see what are these energies. Okay, so let me keep this expression up there, because these energies are going to have the following form. Put this energy in the square. Okay? Where this here is the Fourier transform of the dipole-dipole interaction, which I brought before. Okay. So this is what is called the Bogoliubov spectrum. Okay. Let's forget that we have a dipolar interaction for the moment. Okay. So this spectrum, if this G is positive, right? So let's suppose that this dipole-dipole interaction is 0. Okay. Now I have just this P squared over 2m. P squared over 2m plus 2g and 0. Yes, this is what I have there. So, if g is positive, this means that this quantity is always positive. Because this is positive, this is positive, this is positive. Okay? So this will, so if g is positive, then this energy is positive. This is good for the stability, because this means that the energies here are real numbers. So this means that these energies are real numbers, right? So this means that these quasi-particles will go like something like this. Will evolve with something like this. Yes? This will be the evolution operator for these quasi-particles. Now, a problem, of course, when the G is negative. Because when G is negative, let's see what happens. If G is negative and P is small, right? Then this quantity will be negative. And this is positive. So this means that the whole guy will be now negative. So when P tends to 0, goes in the square, goes like P squared over 2m, which is a positive quantity, times 2g and 0. But now this is a negative quantity. Yes? So this means that these guys, instead of going like this, they go like this. With plus or with minus, right? But what is important for the stability is the plus, because this means that these guys explode. Yes? They are not oscillating anymore, but they are exploding. So this means that your system is unstable. So the presence of energies which are imaginary, or the fact that the energy squared is negative, tells you that my system is going to be dynamically unstable. So, if you have, and this is telling to you that if you have a system without dipolar interactions, with negative scattering length, right, without any trap, you cannot have a condensate. Because you take it, you assume that you have it, you put some ripples, and they blow up your system. Okay? Let's see what happens now in the dipole-dipole interaction. In that case, we are going to, let's have a look to what happens at a small moment. Okay? Then you have P squared 2m times 2 and 0, G plus U dipole-dipole interaction. And this, I will write this explicitly, is something like this, 4 pi over 3, 3 cosine squared theta P minus 1. So what is happening now? is this positive or is this negative? Or I don't know, okay? Let's take that this G, let me just remove this G and put it here. So here, of course, here I forgot the constant, which I call at the beginning CDD, which is telling to be how big is the dipole diagonal interaction. So I will have something like 2D and 0. Here I will have a 1. And here I will have something like 4 pi CDD divided by 3G, something like this. Okay? Now, you see this quantity of here, if this quantity of here is sufficiently large, there will be some angles for which all this quantity is negative. Yes. So, in particular, for example, if you take this angle as 0, right? This will be -1. Yes. So this quantity may become negative. So this means that if the dipole-dipole interaction is sufficiently strong with respect to the contact interaction, there are some angles for which my system is unstable. So if CDD over 3G is sufficiently large, then I have instability. So I will not be able to have a condensate without a trap. So in some sense, it is similar as for the case of negative scattering length, right? Because as for the case of negative scattering length, I will have some excitations which are negative. But here, which are imaginary, and therefore blow up exponentially. But here, there is a very important piece of information. Because only some particular directions will be unstable. Yes? So this theta pi is the angle between the momentum and the direction of the dipole. Yes? Some particular directions are the directions which are making my system unstable. Right? So if I put ripples in other directions, they will be stable. But the problem is that if I put ripples in this direction, then they will be stable. They will be unstable. And that, as a matter of fact, what I need now to make my system stable. In the case of negative scattering length, I have no chance but to make the scattering length positive. Right? Here, I have another possibility, which is to make it in such a way that these directions which are unstable do not contribute. And this tells me that I can trap my system in such a way that I eliminate these directions which are unstable. Yes? In particular, what we will see right now is that if my dipoles are pointing like this, and I trap my system sufficiently strongly in this direction, then I am forbidding these directions which are unstable, right? And I can make my system stable. This is very different to the case with contact interaction, and this is the first message that I would like to give. The stability in a dipolar gas depends very much on the shape of the container. Yes? So you put a container, you put a trap, which is like this, and your system will be unstable. You put it like this, and you just listen.
Yes, but you are saying that the disk shape, it is more stable, no?
This shape is more stable.
But if you make the dipolar interaction go further high, it will collapse.
This we will see right now, why it could collapse as well.
Yes,
This
in the disk shape.
This is another type of instability, different than the one that I am mentioning.
Okay, this is another type of instability.
But if the dipolar interaction, if the confinement is sufficiently strong,
yes, it's
then,
more stable.
Then it's stable. This problem is stabilized. But there will be another one.
Yes.
Yes, which we will discuss right now. Okay, so but this you can, without doing many more complicated calculations, you can see it already from here. Due to the fact that some directions are unstable and some directions not, then I will just simply confine such that these directions which are unstable are not playing a role. Okay. So already from here you see, without much more, that the trapping geometry plays a very important role. So let's move now to precisely this. Let's try to understand what is the role of a trap. Okay? is the role of the trap. Trap-dependent stability. Okay. So let me consider the following situation, simplified situation. My dipole is pointing in the z direction. Okay? This is the z direction, this is the x, y direction, and I say that my dipoles are pointing in that direction. Okay? Now I assume a trap which is like this. Yes? I have a trap which is like this. So this means that I have confinement which is of the following form. It's a harmonic oscillator in the xy plane plus a harmonic oscillator in the z direction, but is cylindrically symmetrical, okay? Like a cylinder. And I will assume that omega z over omega rho is some constant. I call the aspect ratio of the trap. Okay? This is the aspect ratio. So, for what I just told you, it should be that the stability of a dipole condensate depends on this aspect ratio. In particular, if this aspect ratio is very large, is sufficiently large, this means that the frequency in the z direction, so how strong is my confinement in this direction, is stronger than the confinement in that direction. So it will be a disk. So if lambda is larger than 1, it's more like a disk. If lambda is smaller than 1, it's more like a cigar. So for the reason that I just mentioned to you, you will expect that this situation is more unstable. And this is possible to see without doing any calculation. Let's consider that you have a cigar. And let's consider that your cloud has this cigar shape. Not only the trap, but the cloud has this. So you have a cloud of atoms which is like this. Now you have your atoms which are pointing out here, all of them. Yes. So let's try to see what will be the mean dipole-dipole interaction in the system. Okay? Is the average dipole-dipole interaction positive or negative? So is my gas in average attractive or repulsive? Is larger than 0 or is it smaller than 0? Let's see. If my system is elongated, yes, let's make it exaggerated. Okay, let's make it like this. Yes. Now, my dipoles will see each other mostly head with tail, not like this, but like this. So this means that they see each other mostly, or in average, they see each other rather like this. And this means that the dipole-dipole interaction between them is negative. And therefore, for this case, I would expect that the dipole-dipole interaction, in average, is negative. So it's like an attraction. This is bad for the stability, as we just mentioned. Right? Now, on the contrary, if I have a disk like this, they have a disk, and my dipoles are like this, they will see each other mostly side by side. So side by side means positive interaction, so this means that the mean dipole-dipole interaction is positive. Of course, some of them will see each other like this, but in average, they will see each other with a repulsion. So already from here, you can see very clearly that the shape matters a lot, right? And you will understand that there is a situation, there is a limit here, there is a critical aspect ratio at which I am able to kill this instability that I was mentioning before, because here the dipole-dipole interaction will be in average. Okay, so this is an important message.
But here they have the diversions
Sorry?
in this situation.
No,
The second situation.
here.
Yes.
Not really. Not now. Okay? I will comment about excitations there in a second, right? But here there is nothing more than that, so to say. It's just that the dipole-dipole interaction is repulsed. Now, you may study this problem now more theoretically. For example, you can assume a sort of Gaussian ansatz here. So you take a Gaussian wave function, and you just simply study how well you can calculate the energy in this system, and if the energy has a minimum, it's a stable situation. If the energy has not a minimum, then you don't have a solution. I will not do it this here, but the important message that I want you to keep, which is a very simple message, is that the dipole-dipole interaction, the sign of the dipole-dipole interaction depends on the shape. Is the shape cigar? Negative. Is the shape C? This positive. This is a very important message because this will explain many things that I will mention later on in a very simple way. Okay, as I say, there is a critical value of the there is a critical value of this aspect ratio. At which the BEC is stable. This critical, as I told you, so as I told you, there is an interplay between trap, scattering length, and dipole-dipole interaction. Okay. As I told you, that the shape matters for the dipole-dipole interaction, so there is a clear interplay between the trap and the dipole-dipole interaction. But of course, the contact interaction is also there. So this means that this critical aspect ratio is actually a function of the scattering length. So for a given dipole and a given scattering length, you will have a given critical aspect ratio. So let me show you the experimental figure of that. Okay, this is a figure of the group of Kirman Tower in Stuttgart. And this is precisely what I was just mentioning. This is the trap aspect ratio. So the relation between the axial frequency and the radial frequency. This is here. And this is the scattering length of the system. This pink region here is the unstable region, and this is the stable region. Now, let's see what we will get without the contact interaction. So for a scattering length, it is 0. Okay? Now you see that if the trap aspect ratio is small, so if you are cigar, you are stable. You are unstable. This is bad because the dipole-dipole interaction, which is the only interaction that I have in this line, is negative. Now, if I make my trap aspect ratio sufficiently large, yes, then my system becomes stable. And this critical aspect ratio is 5.2. Okay, it's not exactly 1. Yes, it's not exactly 1, and there is a good reason for that. The reason is because what determines whether the interaction is in average positive or negative is not the shape of the trap, but the shape of the cloud I told you before. And they are not exactly the same. Yes. Okay, so at this point the system becomes stable. Now, if you now take a positive scattering length, you stabilize your system. Yes, you make it more stable. So you can make it stable even for a smaller aspect ratio. If you make a negative scattering length, you will make it more unstable. So you will need a larger aspect ratio to make it stable. Yes, so this is the problem. And this matches very well with the numerical response coming from the Grosky-Teisk equation and with this analysis that we just mentioned. I feel that this curve is the result of the gross spontaneity equation, and this is the result of this variational calculation that I was mentioning in this Gaussian. Okay, and these are the experimental. So basically, in these experiments, they just simply do exactly what I understand. They start with a cigar shape cloud here, and they just change the aspect ratio and make it a disk. Okay. Now, so the stability, as I say, depends strongly on the trap aspect ratio. If you have a gas with negative scattering length, then the stability depends very little, actually almost nothing on the aspect ratio. So basically, you will have a jump, for this particular case, you will have a jump basically between stable and unstable. There is nothing like an S-shaped curve here. It's basically like a line. Stable and stable. Okay. Now, in principle, in the experiments of Tillman, actually, in the experiments of Tillman, they are able actually to destabilize the system. So they start with some stable condition here for a given trap aspect ratio, and they change the scattering length, which I told you can be changed by using this scattering resonance. So they start here, they move it to here, and they make it unstable. When this happens, the system collapses. And these are typical collapse pictures of the experiment of Tillman. Yes? In a system which has no dipolar interaction, basically what happens when the system becomes unstable is that it collapses all of it. And it explodes, like this, right? And so basically it collapses, the density increases so much that you start to have what is called three-body processes, so cluster particles and so on, they start to explode, right? But it explodes in a spherically symmetric way. Here, you get this shape in the explosion, which is actually coming from the symmetry of the dipole electron. I will not comment much more on that, and this is also very peculiar of the dipole electron. So keep this in mind because I will come back to this issue in a second. So, but is this the end of the history? Yes. So this is not the end of the history. We have said that I can stabilize this sort of instability. But is my system stable? So I can put whatever number of particles I want in my system if my trap aspect ratio is sufficiently large. And the answer is no. And in order to understand why no, let's make a sort of hand-waving argument. Okay, this brings me to something which I will call proton-like excitations. So let's write again the Bogoliubov spectrum that we were getting. Okay, we were getting something like this. Okay, so this will be a very hand-waving argument with what we make. Yes. So let's forget about this term of here, and let's assume that this is positive. Okay. So for the moment, let's forget about this. Now, how does this look like? So dipole 0. This looks like this. This is momentum, and this is energy. Now, for low momenta, I can neglect this term here. Okay. So for low momenta, my spectrum is actually linear, because EP squared is P squared over 2m times 2g and 0. So this means that the energy is approximately the square root of g n0 m c. Yes? This is what is called the sound velocity in the system. Okay, so this is what is called the Von part of the spectrum. And this is proportional, as I say, to momentum. It's linear. Now, for large momenta, what happens for large momenta? For large momenta, this is so large compared to the other that my energy here, so this was for low momenta, but for large momenta, the energy will be just p squared over 2m, because this will dominate with respect to any of things. So this means that here I will get a quadratic expression. This will be quadratic and this is linear. So this is proportional to p squared, and this is what is called the single particle contribution. Single particle part of the spectrum. Single particle. So I get the phonon and I get the single particle. So what is important for you to understand, as I said, this will be a very hand-waving argument, okay? The calculation is a little bit more complicated, but what is important for this is that without dipolar interaction, so without this term here, I am having here a constant. This is not momentum dependent, it's a constant. Yes? And this will give you this simply. Let's try to see what happens if I have dipolar. If I have dipolar interaction, I will get a constant here, which is coming from the Sorge part. But then I will have some function of here which depends on the momentum itself. Yes? So this is the dipole-dipole interaction. I have this constant of here, which depends. I have this function which is given by the dipole interaction, which depends on momentum. Okay. So we have seen how this behaves in a three-dimensional homogeneous system, right? This was the Fourier transform that I was getting before. Let's try to get an idea of how this will behave for this disk. Okay? Let's consider the disk. This disk has a given width, yes, which is given by the harmonic oscillator length in this direction. Okay? I have, let's call it LZ, LC, LC. Yeah. So this is some length which is characterizing this thin direction. Yeah. Now, suppose that I have a modulation, one of these ripples. I have a modulation. Now, if my modulation, the typical length of the modulation, let's call it, which will be 1 divided by the momentum. Yes. The typical length of the modulation, the wavelength of the modulation. It will be the wavelength of the modulation, right? Is much larger than this distance. This means that within a wavelength, yes, this modulation behaves, if you want, like a disk. Yes? Because now my wavelength is like this, yes? And my size is, my transversal size is like this. So within a modulation, I have a very big distance here and a very small distance here. So it's like a disk. Dipole-dipole interaction, positive. Okay? Once more. So we expect that this function of here will be positive. Now suppose that I have the opposite situation. I have a wavelength now, which is smaller or comparable than this direction. So this means that now my modulation, yes, the length of the modulation is comparable to this direction. So this means that within a wavelength, I am like living in one of these cigars. Right? Conclusion, this dipole-dipole interaction here will be negative. Yes. As I'm saying, you should not take this in a strict mathematical sense. So it's just to understand, because the expression is more complicated. But this helps you to understand. So this will tell you that in a trap like this, the sign of the dipole-dipole interaction depends on the momentum. I have a large momentum, positive. I have a small momentum, negative. sorry, the opposite. I have a large momentum negative, I have a small momentum positive. So, this function of here, this function, yes, as a function of momentum, will start being positive and then it will become negative. Yes? So that's what exactly goes like this. So it goes from some positive value to some negative value. So let's try to understand what does this mean for the system. Okay? We have three contributions here, which are the three energies scales that we were commenting before. The non-interacting part, which is the kinetic energy, the contact interaction, which is a constant, and this, which is the dipolar part, which is a function of momentum, and in particular is something like this. Yes? So let's suppose that this constant is positive. Yes? At zero momentum, I will have something positive and something positive. Yes? So if I now have a look to how the excitation spectrum looks like, so this is now energy versus momentum, right? This is positive. I assume, because I am assuming, notice that G is positive. Yeah? So this constant is positive. This is positive. So I will start having this phonon part of the spectrum, yes, which is going like this. With some regularized sound velocity because of the dipole, but it's still of this form. Now, if this is dominant, right, then I don't care about the sign of this because this will be very small anyway. Yes. So for large momenta, I hope I have again something like p squared. So this is p and this is p squared. So this is very similar to what we are having here. The question is, what do you have in between? Because in between you may have the following. If this if the prefactor which is here, which is given by the strength of the dipolar interaction, is sufficiently large with respect to this constant, yes, what is what you are going to do? We said that this goes from positive to 0 to negative. So this means that when you increase the momentum, this quantity which is here is not a constant, it's something which may become negative. Yes? So this means that the contribution of this is starting being positive and then may become negative. Yes? So when you increase the momentum, your dispersion, instead of growing, may go down. Yes? May go down because of the momentum dependence of the dipolar interaction. If this happens before this guy dominates, because of course this guy will eventually dominate, then you have something like this. Yeah. So your dispersion, instead of being something which is always growing, has a minimum. This is what is called the roton. I will call it roton-like. It's a minimum in the dispersion law. Yes? So you have a minimum here. So you have phonon here. You have single particle, but now you will have a roton part of this. This is very interesting because this is the behavior that you have in helium physics. In helium physics, right, the spectrum in helium, right, has this form. It's not due to the dipole-dipole interaction in helium, it's due to strong repulsion. But this is similar to helium. Yes? Similar. But let me call it roton-like. Yes? Okay, and this is another feature which is very peculiar of dipolar system. This is very peculiar in this of these systems. Now, how much time I have? 10 minutes? Half an hour?
No, 5 minutes.
Just a small question. Here you have a trap, and there is uniform.
Sorry?
And there you have a trap in this picture,
Yes.
and there is no trap there.
I have a trap here, but no trap here.
Okay.
Now I will put a trap.
The dispersion there is trap there?
There's a trap in this direction.
Okay.
This is very important because otherwise I would not have these arguments called the cigar or not.
Luis,
Yes.
what is the role of the thread along
Along this direction.
so it should not completely block the motion along the...
Exactly. This is
Because
important.
otherwise the interaction is positive.
Yes. So this is an important point. So this is just summarizing what we are just saying. The condition for a rotor-like minimum is, first of all, that you should have a large enough ratio. So this should be sufficiently large compared to that. And the second is that you are in a pancake trap, but not two-dimensional. You need to be three-dimensional. Because you need to experience the third dimension. Right? This is important. Because if it were just purely two-dimensional, then it would not be there. Now, another point which is important is that the rotor minimum occurs at a momentum, so this, around the inverse of the length in this direction, because of the argument that we just mentioned. Right? So you can do this in a more complicated way, but the argument is just what we just said. Okay. Now, this argument is not considering what happens on the plane. So in the plane, I don't have a trap in this argument. Now let's put a trap. Yes? Because this makes the things interesting as well. So let me put a trap. This I will try to do it now with the slides. So this is for the moment without the trap. Yes. So this is now the way you do it. We're not doing hand waving. So basically you do again this sort of transformation, this Pogoliubov transformation that we said before. This is not so important here. What is important is that the dispersion low, yes, at least in the vicinity of the rotor, is of this form. So let me just go one by one. So this is the kinetic energy, okay? This is the trapping frequency in this direction, in the strong direction. Now what is important is this term. This is the chemical potential. The chemical potential is proportional to the density, okay? So let me just write it. Is proportional to the density. This here is just a function. It doesn't matter what it is. It is given by the relation between the dipole interaction and the contact interaction. The only important thing of this is that this function, if this is sufficiently large, this ratio, this function is positive. Okay? This is the only important thing. Assume that this is positive. Then what you have? This is a positive contribution. That is a positive contribution, but this is negative. There's a minus sign. Now this is positive, and this is positive. So you get a minus sign. This is what bends the curve down. Yes, what bends the curve down. Now, how much do you bend the curve down? Yes, how much do you bend the curve down? How deep is this rotor minimum? Yes, how close is to zero? Now this is given by the, if you see by the chemical potential, right? The larger is the chemical potential, so the larger is the density, the larger is the bending, and therefore the deeper is the rotor. So larger N, deeper rotor. Okay?
What is omega in this formula?
This is the transversal frequency. This frequency. So this is actually an approximate expression that we found in that paper, which is not there, but which you don't see it here, sorry. But this is the numerical calculation, and here there is a line you don't see, which is this analytical expression. Now, so larger density, deeper rotor. So deeper minimum. Okay. So let's see what happens in the presence of the trap. Yes. Now, in the presence of the trap, you can study this problem from the knowledge of the homogeneous situation. Yes. So you have now a trap. Yes. So you have a trough now in the z direction. It's not only that you have a trough in the z direction, you have a trough now in the xy direction as well. And your cloud is now has what is called a Thomas Fermi profile. So the cloud so this is the yes. So now you don't have an infinite disk, yes, but now you have a given radius in the xy plane. So this is the xy plane and this is the density. Yes. And now, what I will try to do is to get some idea of how the excitation spectrum will look like in this situation. And for this, I will introduce something which is called the local density approximation. The local density approximation is something very simple. You take, so now the density depends on space, right? But let me just take a patch here, a small region here, or a small region here, I don't know. Yes? Which will have a given density, n. Yes? And now I look to my homogeneous solution for this particular n. Yes? So now n is local, it depends on the xy position. Sorry. Xy position, right? But I will proceed like with an homogeneous system. And from here I will get what is the energy, yes, now for this particular density. Sorry, for this particular density. Yes, because in an homogeneous system is characterized by a density. Yes? For a given density, you know the solution. So now what we will take is the density here and see what would be the solution in the homogeneous system. A density here, what would be the solution in the homogeneous system, and so on. Is this correct? Yes. Up to which point is this correct? Now this depends on the momentum of the excitation that you are calculating. Suppose, so this is this Thomas Fermi profile, yes? So now suppose that I have an excitation, a ripple, right, one of these ripples, which has a momentum which is comparable to the size of the system. Yes? So I have a modulation which is like this, something like that. In that case, the local density approximation is certainly wrong, right? Because I cannot take a small patch here. Within a given wavelength, I have a large variation of the density. Now, suppose that I am having a modulation like this. Very strong modulation. So this means that now I can take a patch here, the density will be more or less constant, yes? And I will have a lot of excitation, a lot of oscillations there. In that case, the local density approximation gives a good answer, right? So, this means that for large P, okay. For low P, bad. Yes? For low P, the local density approximation is bad. Now, that's it. This means that I am good here, and I am bad here, sorry, and good here, for example. In the typical Bogoliubov spectrum, so in the spectrum which is like this, that we just simply said before, this typically means that here you can do local density approximation, and here you cannot do local density approximation. But the problem is that when you are in the single particle parts of the spectrum, you are just given by the kinetic energy. You don't care about the local density, because the density doesn't play any role. Right? So one thing is when it's okay, and another thing is when it's useful. Right? Here it is okay, but not very useful, because the density here plays no role, because the full energy is just given by P squared over 2m. There is no density. Now, the situation is different in our case now with the rotor, because now we will have this region where density effects are important, because the density gives you the depth, right? But at the same time, I can use the local density approximation, because I can use this local density approximation because this rotor momentum, which is here, Q rotor, is proportional to the inverse left in the z direction. Now, if this is much larger than the inverse size of your system. So if you want, if the Thomas Taylor radius is much larger than the z direction, right, then I can use local density approximation. There is no problem. So now I will use local density approximation in a situation where the density really plays a very important role. Okay? So now we are reaching to the point I wanted to reach now. So, summarizing. Now I am in this condition where the local density approximation is a good approximation, yes, and still my system is very density dependent. So now what will happen? So now this means that I can define a sort of local spectrum, which is the same as I wrote before, but now this chemical potential is a function of space, right? This is basically the local density approximation. But as I told you before, larger n means deeper rotor. So this means that if you are here, your local proton will be like this. If you are here, your local proton will be very flat. And if you are in the outskirts, your local proton has basically disappeared. Yeah? So if now you plot this spectrum as a function of space and momentum, red means minimum. So this means that now you have a minimum both in momentum and in space. But what is a minimum in space? Yes? A minimum in momentum is this rotor. A minimum in space is a trap. Yes? It's a trap. It's a confinement. So this means that your protons are confined. So your protons will be confined due to the shape of your system. Yes? They will be confined at the center. Yes? And indeed, you can now develop around this minimum, and you see that the energy in the square has this shape, and this shape is an effective harmonic oscillator plus a dispersion which has this shape. Yes. So there is a given proton localization length, which is given by the harmonic oscillator length of this effective strap. Right? And then you can basically now take this local spectrum, which I wrote it in a classical form, and just put it here operator, right, and solve the Schrödinger equation associated to that. Incidentally, this problem is very similar to the spinor recoupling, for example. In the spinor recoupling, you have, this is a comment, you have this type of dispersion law as well. So you can now calculate which are the eigenfunctions of this system. The important thing is just to realize that my protons, if I see this from the perspective not of the atoms, but of these protons, so to say, my protons are seeing a trap. Yes? They see a trap. They are here. My protons are there. Yes? Are trapped in this region. Now, since they are trapped, they will see discrete states here of the trap in quantum mechanics. Right? So these are these discrete states, which is basically the solution of a harmonic oscillator. Plus, this is this ring in momentum space. So the wave functions are actually of this form. And this is actually something that you can see numerically. This was done actually by Blair Becky in New Zealand in last year, at the end of last year. This is the spectrum. Yes. This is the if you want the momentum, and this is the angular momentum. This is not so important. But what is important is that you expect to have a sort of continuous spectrum here. This is this rotor. But now you start to see the appearance of discrete states here. So what they call the finger. It's like a finger here. And these are these discrete states. These discrete states. These discrete states here. So your system starts to have discrete states, and actually they study the properties of these discrete states, and they follow pretty well this dependence. So basically, the point that I wanted to mention here is that since the proton depends on the density, since the proton depth depends on the density, in these systems in which you have an inhomogeneous confinement, an homogeneous trapping, in which your cloud has this paraboloid inverse parabola shape, the proton here has an energy different than the proton here, And in particular, here it has less energy than here. So this means that it cannot move. It is bouncing here. It is stuck. And quantum mechanically, this means that you have the levels of harmonic oscillator, and you can calculate, and they have this roton-like state. This is a problem which is particularly important for experiments. Right? Because if you want to measure the roton, for example, you have to take into account the fact that the roton is. Okay, so I would like to stop here. So we have seen now what? We have seen that the physics of a Bose-Einstein condensate with dipolar interaction depends very much on, so changes very much compared to the case without dipolar interaction. And this is due to two ingredients of the dipolar interaction: anisotropy and the long range interaction. This makes that, for example, the physics of your condensate, right? Now the stability will depend on the shape. We have said that if my shape is more disc-like, it will be more stable. If I have a cigar, it will be more unstable. Then we saw at the end that if now you compress and you have this apparently stable system, yes, your system could become unstable. This I didn't mention, but this you can see from here. My system could become unstable if this minimum touches 0. Yes, because in that moment my system will become unstable. So I didn't mention about the roton instability, perhaps I will mention it tomorrow at the very beginning. But what is important is the appearance of this minimum integral. And we saw a sort of hand-waving argument why you have this. And the last thing that I comment to you, which is a recent work that we did last year, is that the depth of this roton depends on the position you want to put. And this leads to roton profile.
So is it true that if you, for any trap, this shape or cigar shape, if you keep on increasing the atoms, it will touch the 0 and it will collapse?
Yes, but the collapse is different.
Yeah, but it will be unstable.
It will be unstable, but the collapse is different.
Yes.
Because
No, it's
one
different.
thing is that this part of the spectrum becomes unstable, which is what happens in cigar-shaped traps, which is called phonon instability, that the phonons are unstable. And the other thing is that these guys become unstable. It's a different type of instability. I will mention it tomorrow.
It becomes unstable in all cases. no?
In all cases, it will become eventually unstable. This is this graph of Tillman-Fabre.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Luis, there's a general question about experiments.
Yes.
So you mentioned experiments in the first part about the stability, the phonon stability. About the roton physics, do we have experimental information?
For the moment, there is no experiment on rotons. And so the best way to see the roton would be to perform something which is called Bragg spectroscopy. So Bragg spectroscopy is something relatively simple. You take two lasers with a given mismatch of momentum and with a given mismatch of energy, such that you go up and down, right? And here you absorb a given momentum and a given energy. Yeah? So this will be just resonant if you go up and then you go down here. So if you go with this energy and with this momentum. Yeah? And in this way you can map basically the Bogoliubov spectrum. So the best way to analyze Bogoliubov spectrum is to, for example, to study it like this. The people was studying the usual Bogoliubov spectrum in this way. Now the problem to do this in a confinement is exactly what I just mentioned. Is the shape here is local. Here is one thing, here is another thing, here is another thing. So the best way to do it, I was talking with Francesca, for example, would be to have a flat trap like Zora. It would be the best way.
Good